Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 6 months, chances are that you've caught wind of the kerfluffle surrounding the release of the 2016 reboot of Ghostbusters. So what's going on here? Are Ghostbusters fans really a bunch of nostalgia-fueled bigots? Or is this whole thing just an epic game of misdirection? To answer these questions, we'll have to tackle the myth about diversity in Ghostbusters. Even though the lion's share of the controversy surrounding this film concerns allegations of sexism towards women, there have been a few voices out there who've been insinuating that the original Ghostbusters was either racist or had issues related to racism. While there's evidence to suggest that Ernie Hudson may indeed have gotten the short end of the stick due to executive meddling reducing his character's role, the people claiming that the film itself is racist are, to put it mildly, profoundly ignorant about what exactly Winston's role was in the first movie. But in order to explain the character's importance and contribution to the film, we first need to examine the roles of the other three Ghostbusters to understand exactly how he fits in. Ray Stantz and Egon Spengler are, of course, the intellectuals, the supernatural experts, the technological wizards. They're also not what you might call grounded or socially adept.
Of course you forget, Peter. I was present at an undersea, unexplained mass sponge migration.
Do you have any hobbies?
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
This being the case, the role of the normal guy falls to Peter Venkman by default, and initially it's actually a pretty good fit. At the beginning of the movie, he clearly isn't a true believer in the paranormal.
As a friend, I have to tell you, you're finally going around the bend on this ghost business. You guys have been running your ass off, meeting and greeting every schizo in the five bros who says he has a paranormal experience. What have you seen?
As Dean Yeager points out, he's a charlatan who really does seem to view the research he's conducting as a dodge or hustle that he can use to get laid or make money. So he's thrust into the role of the audience surrogate, the character who reacts like we would if we were in his shoes. At first, he's pretty clueless about what to do when faced with the supernatural.
So what do we do?
Yes, Ray and Egon were admittedly also at a loss, but they at least managed to get the readings and information they needed during the New York Public Library incident to confirm their theories and build the proton packs and ghost traps. But back to Peter. Even though he's clearly still not taking the whole thing seriously when he goes to check out Dana Barrett's apartment...
I'm sorry, I'm just not getting any reading.
Well, are you sure you're using that thing correctly?
There's not, I think so.
Things begin to change after his close encounter with Slimer at the Sedgwick Hotel. While he never comes close to Ray and Egon in terms of knowledge or experience, Peter does demonstrate that he's capable of doing independent research, provided that he's sufficiently motivated.
Do you have some information for me, please?
Well, sure, but I prefer to give it to you in private.
Why don't you tell me now?
Well, okay, I found the name Zool for you.
Then, after Dana's possession, he quickly and calmly assesses the situation while using his social engineering skills to pump Zool for information, showing that he's actually learned from his experiences since his encounter with the library ghost.
I didn't get your name.
I am Zool. I am the gatekeeper.
Oh. What are we doing today, Zool?
We must prepare for the coming of Gozer,
Gozer, huh?
the Destructor.
Ironically, Peter's competence in dealing with the paranormal is inversely proportional to his suitability as an audience surrogate. The better he gets, the less qualified he is to represent us. Why? Well, the problem is that ghostbusting isn't just a job for him, it becomes his lifestyle. Because he lives in the firehouse with Egon and Ray and faces constant exposure to the weirdness of their occupation 24/7 without being able to get away from it, he inevitably gets used to it, which is good for him, but bad for us. And this is where Winston Zeddemore comes in. When he's introduced a little over 40 minutes into the movie, he takes over the role of the audience surrogate from Peter. Winston's the working class stiff, the everyman.
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
Unlike the others, he has no emotional or financial investment in ghostbusting beyond making his $11,500 a year. That's roughly $26,500 in 2016 US dollars, and can go home to his apartment at the end of his shift, crack open a cold one, and forget all about work. A luxury that Peter doesn't have. Well, at least not in the first movie. Peter clearly has his own bachelor pad in the sequel and lets Dana and her son Oscar hide out there. But Winston's more than just an audience surrogate. While Peter humored Egon and Ray and even indulged in their eccentricities even before he became a believer in the supernatural, Winston has no such inclinations.
Hey, wait a minute. Hey. Hold it. Now, we're actually going to go before a federal judge and say that some moldy Babylonian god is going to drop in on Central Park West and start tearing up the city?
Sumerian, not Babylonian.
Yeah, big difference. No offense, but I got to get my own lawyer.
In other words, he's the straight man who serves as the voice of reason and common sense. And nowhere else does this become more evident than in the following scene.
Hey, Ray, do you remember something in the Bible about the last days when the dead would rise from the grave?
I remember Revelation 7:12. And I looked as he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth, and the moon became as blood.
And the seas boiled, and the skies fell.
Judgment Day.
Judgment Day.
Every ancient religion has its own myth about the end of the world.
Myth. Ray, has it ever occurred to you that maybe the reason we've been so busy lately is because the dead have been rising from the grave?
This right here is the defining character moment for Winston. Just look at Ray's reaction to the bombshell he's just dropped. It's clear that Ray and Egon were so preoccupied in dealing with ghosts and having their life's work vindicated that they missed the forest for the trees. Even though they were the intellectual heavyweights when it came to the paranormal, it was Winston, someone with no detailed knowledge of the supernatural, who realized the greater significance of what was happening first. So, in short, Winston Zedmore's character is not, and never has been, racist. In the novelization of the original movie, he was a former Marine. If you consider Ghostbusters the video game from 2009 canonical, he even has a PhD in Egyptology.
Well, here we are, the Egypt exhibit. I practically lived here while I was working on my doctorate.
Clearly, he's way more learned and intelligent than most people give him credit for. Contrary to what Sony Pictures PR people and the 2016 movie's cast and crew would have you believe, the idea of female Ghostbusters is really nothing new. The truth of the matter is that they've been around in one form or another for almost as long as the franchise itself has. This, of course, raises the inevitable question: who was the first female Ghostbuster? The answer to that depends on exactly what you mean. If you're asking who the first female character to hunt ghosts following the release of the original 1984 movie was, that honor belongs to this young woman of color.
I'm Futura, Ghostbusters of the future.
Yes, Futura, the self-described Ghostbusters of the future from the oft-ridiculed and much maligned Filmation Ghostbusters cartoon, technically qualifies as the first female Ghostbuster, having made her initial appearance in Frights of the Round Table, the second episode of the series, which first aired on September 9th, 1986. Of course, many of you are probably uninterested in this little bit of trivia and are wondering when the first such female character appeared in the franchise most people associate with the word Ghostbusters these days. Well, for that, you'd have to wait a whole 7 weeks more, because Janine Melnitz, or more correctly said, the physical manifestation of her dream self, became the first female Ghostbuster in Mr. Sandman Dream Me a Dream, the 7th episode of the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, which premiered on August 25th, 1986.
I'm a Ghostbuster!
Good night, Winston Zedmore.
Good night yourself, Buster.
For the record, it took almost a year before the real Janine donned the proton pack coveralls and boots. That episode, entitled Janine Melnitz's Ghostbuster appropriately enough, which aired on September 29, 1987 as part of the cartoon's second season, ended with her rescuing the Ghostbusters from Proteus, a primal god on par with Gozer the Gozerian. Now there's some real girl power for you. But I can hear the nitpickers complaining already. Janine was never an official member of the Ghostbusters, so she doesn't count. And I guess that's technically true. The first woman who was a full-fledged member of a Ghostbusters team was this young lady.
The name's Kylie.
Yes, Kylie Griffin. Cute goth chick, Egon Spengler fangirl and occult expert, voiced by the famous Tara Strong of the Powerpuff Girls and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fame, was one of a new diverse cast of paranormal elimination experts introduced in the unfortunately short-lived Extreme Ghostbusters cartoon from 1997. And she was far from the last. Since Kylie, there's also been the unnamed female rookie, unofficially dubbed Maddie Collins, who could be selected as a female protagonist in the Nintendo Wii, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation Portable versions of 2009's Ghostbusters the video game. Even more recently, IDW Publishing's Ghostbusters comics have brought in a veritable slew of female characters, both old and new, to answer the call. First, we have Special Agent Melanie Ortiz, the Ghostbusters FBI liaison, who formed a temporary group of Ghostbusters with the IDW Ghostbusters Universe's versions of Janine Melnitz and Kylie Griffin after Peter, Ray, Egon, and Winston mysteriously disappeared. Then there's Luke Hamaka and Danish Pak, former members of a rival group of paranormal eliminators known as the Ghost Smashers, who ended up joining a Chicago-based franchise of the Ghostbusters. So, to sum up, Sony Pictures, Paul Feig, the cast of the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, and their shills in the mainstream media want the public to believe that the 32-year-old fandom of a franchise, which started out with 3 white guys and a black guy, but has since gone on to introduce another black guy, a Latin American guy, 3 white women, a Latin American woman, a black woman, and a ginger in a goddamn wheelchair without incident, is reacting poorly to their movie because it's made up of a bunch of racist, sexist, misogynistic man-babies who hate diversity. Yeah, and I'm sure you have a bridge you want to sell us to. In a recent interview, Ivan Reitman, the director of the original Ghostbusters movie and its sequel, had this to say about the rather tepid reception the reboot has received.
Well, look, it surprised me a little bit, but then I realized many of the people who were writing were about 8 or 9 years old when the 1984 Ghostbusters movie came out, and it was kind of a seminal moment in their lives. And look, it's a nice compliment to me. It's that the film has sort of held up for them as an important, at least cinematic experience in their lives. And there was no 1.5 minute trailer that was going to stand up to that, that emotionality of what that experience is like. It goes beyond like how good or bad a movie is. It actually goes to kind of a life experience. And so I think the first trailer was fine. I don't think it was the greatest trailer. It certainly wasn't the worst trailer in the world. And I think there was a certain amount of gender bias by a tiny group of people who lurk on the internet. But I wouldn't put it that as much as kind of some sense of disappointment for people who went through this kind of experience for themselves.
And Reitman's, well, right, man. For many of us, childhood was when we were happiest and experienced many things for the first time with the kind of wide-eyed inspirational wonderment that almost inevitably fades over time. For any revival, reimagining, or reboot of a classic property with a dedicated fan base to succeed, your best bet is to stay true to the spirit and tone of the original and avoid making too many gratuitous changes. The ultimate metric, however, is quality. Even radical changes can be overlooked if your story is excellent and filled with great ideas. But woe betide the fool who fails to do either one. This is why, warning, spoiler alert, Pidge from 1984's Voltron Defender of the Universe being gender-bent into a teenage girl who assumes a male identity to unravel the military cover-up of the disappearance of her father and brother in the 2016 Netflix reboot Voltron Legendary Defender has resulted in its IMDb rating being higher than even the original cartoon, while Michael Bay trying to turn the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from mutants into aliens resulted in widespread derision and scorn. Also, in spite of what the mainstream media would have you believe, this kind of negative backlash to radical deviations from the source material isn't a guy thing. Unless, of course, you seriously want to make the argument that it was all those pesky dude bros in the Gem and the Holograms fandom who sent death threats to John M. Chu, the director of the 2015 live-action movie, for gender-bending Eric Raymond into Erica Raymond and turning Synergy into a friggin' Aibo. Which brings us back to the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot, and how I'm pretty sure a lot of the people behind it are asking themselves some pretty basic questions behind closed doors.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.
See, the one person most directly responsible for the unusually vitriolic backlash this movie has received is its director, Paul Feig. To understand why this is, though, we need to go back in time almost 2 years to August 3rd, 2014, before he was even officially confirmed as the movie's director, I might add, when he made the following response to someone's accusation that his pushing for an all-female Ghostbusters amounted to a gimmick due to his tendency of having female protagonists and largely female casts in his big-screen movies. Now, this its current year argument was, at best, a very, very subtle insinuation that the person making the statement was sexist. It was only once Christy Puchko of Cinema Blend got her hands on the tweet and wrote an article the next day that someone in the media actually stated it outright for the first time, marking the official beginning of the critics of the all-new Ghostbusters are sexist and misogynist narrative. To be completely fair to both parties here, Puchko's article at least acknowledged the possibility that other reasons might exist for the admittedly unusual amounts of flack this project was receiving, and that it should ultimately be judged on its own merits. And Feig himself tried to defuse the situation with some reassuring tweets in December 2014. The goodwill was short-lived, however, because thanks to Feig and individuals like self-proclaimed social agitator Anne Thériault over the course of the next several months, the misogyny and sexism narrative would slowly pick up speed and crystallize into its current form thanks to comments and articles like these. And these. The first big mistake that Feig and his supporters made was misunderstanding the nature of the Ghostbusters fandom. Unlike other franchises, such as Star Trek and Star Wars, where a relatively steady trickle of new television and movie projects are always looming on the horizon, Ghostbusters as a movie franchise has pretty much been dead and languishing in development hell for the past 27 years. Well, 21 years if you consider Dan Aykroyd's uncredited cameo as Ray Stantz in the 1995 live-action Casper the Friendly Ghost movie as canon.
Who you gonna call?
Someone else.
Ghostbusters has endured over the years as a result of, among other things, the selfless efforts of fan groups, such as the Canadian-based Montreal Ghostbusters and Ontario Ghostbusters, who've become fixtures on the convention circuit as cosplayers raising money for charity. So, needless to say, Feig and the mainstream media seemingly accusing large portions of the dedicated fandom that helped keep interest in the franchise alive long enough for him to even make his movie, of being sexist and misogynist for not embracing his creative vision, didn't go over well with observers and those in the know. The second big mistake they made was doing very little to endear themselves to casual fans or the general public. From some pretty cringeworthy photos shot during a visit to a medical center by the cast in full costume, to proving that all the gender politics you ridiculed your detractors for claiming existed actually did exist, to leaked emails where Bill Murray was apparently threatened with legal action if he refused to make a cameo in the reboot, to accusing everyone who disliked the March 2016 trailer of being a sexist, misogynistic male bigot, thus erasing the opinions and existences of all the women who also hated it, to deleting or hiding comments on what has become the most disliked movie trailer in YouTube's history to promote this bogus narrative, to openly insulting your critics on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
A lot of these guys,
terrific fellas.
Yeah, who seem to have, I don't know, maybe very empty lives, are upset because they say, oh, well, we can't have female Ghostbusters because only men can fight imaginary ghosts in a make-believe movie.
Yeah, baby. But then what they don't say when they're typing is that, like, 1 minute after they type that, their mom's like, get upstairs and take out the garbage. You're 45 years old.
But I think you're probably more right than even people would believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost as if acting like a knuckle-dragging retard by guilting, shaming, and insulting the intelligence of your target audience isn't a viable marketing strategy. Or, to use the TLDR meta version of all this,
You take that aisle, I'll take the far one.
Okay, you sweaty freaks, I'm about to save you from this ghost! Ah! Okay, so I don't know if it was a race thing or a lady thing, but I'm mad as hell.
So, to everyone listening, here's my 2 cents. If you want to see the original cast in action one last time, go find a copy of 2009's Ghostbusters the video game. They not only managed to get all the actors and actresses to reprise their roles by voicing their digital counterparts, but Dan Aykroyd and the late Harold Ramis contributed to the script. So this is about as close as you're ever going to get to a real Ghostbusters 3. If you want to read about the continuing adventures of the Ghostbusters, then I strongly suggest picking up issues of IDW Publishing's ongoing series, which consider the events of the first two movies and the aforementioned video game canonical. While I don't like everything that IDW's put out since they acquired the license and started publishing comics based on it in 2008, everything starting with the regular ongoing series from September 2011 with writers Eric Berman and Tristan Jones and artist Dan Schoening at the helm has been great in my opinion. With all the in-jokes, cameos, and references, you can absolutely tell that the creative team has genuine affection for the source material in all its incarnations and are huge fans themselves. What more can you ask for? Heck, they've even had crossovers with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and their alternate reality selves from the real Ghostbusters cartoon. Seeing Peter Venkman interact with Raphael and an alternate universe version of himself is worth the price of admission alone. If you must see a new Ghostbusters movie on June 15, 2016, then head over to Netflix and watch Ghost Heads, a crowd-funded documentary exploring 3 decades of the franchise's history and featuring interviews with both the creative luminaries behind it as well as the fans whose lives it's affected in ways both subtle and profound. With a little over a day since the movie's release in the United Kingdom, and less than 4 days until it hits North American theaters, all I know for certain is that this can only go one of two ways. The reboot will either be dead on arrival, or it will go the Michael Bay route and make the ridiculous amounts of money required to justify the greenlighting of progressively worse but inexplicably still profitable sequels. As for me, I suspect that this movie will do wonders for Paul Feig's directorial career, the same way that Batman and Robin did for Joel Schumacher's.